it's a public meeting, and I will be chairing until Councillor Lee Robinson arrives. So has anybody got any declarations of interest to make? Thank you. Noted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarise the position of where we are at the moment. Then I'm going to ask my colleague from Strategic Rail, David Hogarth, to run through the paper, Richard George to make some comments, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. So we're here today because Manchester is one of the most congested parts of the rail network. Ever since 2018, passengers have faced unacceptable delays and impacts on their lives. We're faced with a very difficult decision on short-term service changes, which we need to improve the reliability of the passengers which have come whilst we push for the infrastructure investment that is needed here in the north of England across our rail network. So by working together to scrutinise these task force proposals, we've shown the value of local involvement, working to get the best outcomes for passengers. Transport for North is not the client or the funder of infrastructure. We're reliant on Department for Transport. We have to use our evidence base and influence, including statutory advice, to push for the right outcomes. We've worked really closely with the Department through the Rail North Partnership and have secured regular roundtable meetings going forward. The Department have highlighted that the Minister's ambition is to get the best outcome for passengers. And unfortunately today we couldn't have the roundtable. Diary pressures means that the Minister can no longer convene that roundtable that was planned. He's very keen to sort an alternative date, and that will be going through people's diaries imminently. The Minister very much welcomes a positive outcome from the Rail North Committee meeting now, allowing for the industry to complete development work so that a detailed public consultation can follow. We've made some progress, including securing a roadmap for delivery, and made it clear that there needs to be a step up in the commitment to investment in rail. Only with this can we move forward on service changes, which will generate and benefit the vast majority of travelling passengers. But there are still short-term impacts on connectivity, which must be considered. So I'm going to ask Richard George to make some remarks later, and there will also be an opportunity, of course, for members to give their views. But I'd just like to now hand over to David Hogarth to introduce the report. David.
Thanks very much, Tim. Members have had the report. It's been published. I'm not going to go through it in a lot of detail. Adam Timewell's the author of the report. He's on hand if there are any detailed questions to ask. Essentially, this report presents the outcomes of the Manchester Recovery Task Force work and their initial phase of consultation, which we undertook jointly with the Department for Transport and the Task Force. Really, this goes back to the railways in and around Manchester being the major congestion point in the north of England, impacting on reliability right across the area. We all know how difficult journeys around the north and across Manchester have been since May 18. The current timetable simply doesn't work. The timetable we were running before COVID doesn't work, and the number of services effectively has to be reduced temporarily pending investment in the long-term infrastructure solution, which will sort the problem out in the medium to longer term. So the three options were consulted on by the task force, and they all had common objectives around improving overall reliability and maintaining as many rail services as possible for passengers. All options went through initial performance testing, and the proposed option way forward recommended by the task force has something like a 24-25% reduction in delays for all passengers. That translates to something like 100,000 minutes every day of delay reduction, and for the typical passengers about an hour reduction if they travel at the same time each day across the month. So the task force reviewed the consultation responses. There were significant responses from the consultation. I think it's fair to say there wasn't one single view. They've tried to take those responses on board and actually weighted them by passenger numbers, so not by the number of responses, but by the number of passengers impacted by either connectivity changes or changes in frequency of services. So they did that, and they've presented an alternative option, which is a variation of option B. That adds in some things that were not in option B, or in some cases in option C, which is the Southport to Wigan, Southport on Wigan to South Manchester service, so Liverpool to Manchester Airport service, and also Chester to Manchester Airport connectivity. Their view is that maintains connectivity for about 6,000 passengers out of 8,500 that otherwise would have been impacted. So it reduces the impact on passengers. That proposal does require more trains and more staff to operate them, but the assessment shows that it also brings in more revenue to the industry overall. There are some important issues to be resolved still, as we are well aware, and these will need to continue in parallel with the next stage of work. What we have done is secured a roadmap which is attached to the document, to the report, that shows the next steps beyond the 2022 change, and indicates this is not a single one-off change, it's a journey, and we will be expecting the timetable to develop further every timetable beyond 2022. So the paper presents option B plus as the recommended option for 2022. To implement a change in 2022, the industry does need some direction to develop the timetables in more detail for what would be a second phase of consultation on the detail of those timetables in the autumn, but they need to work through that detail and do further performance modelling on that. The alternative option we highlight in the report is to continue with a version of today's timetable and seek to improve on that, but that does have some significant gaps in it, and those gaps will grow as demand returns, as we hope, in the post-COVID world. So the options are there. We're seeking guidance from members today on that proposal and on the next steps. And I think, Tim, it's at this point we can probably ask Richard George, who's been helping out with this work, to say a few words.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Tim. My role in this was to come and have a conversation with many of you to try and understand better. So I think I fully understand the depth of feeling about this. My position on this is that unfortunately we're facing exactly the same problem we were describing in early 2019, when following May 18 we realised that we just were trying to put too many trains through the Cassfield corridor, and as a consequence the whole of the performance across the whole of the northern network was impacted, and we can't go forward with congested infrastructure on that basis. Which means, unfortunately, as we identified then, we've got to take a step backwards in order to ensure that there's a system that works in balance. And that leaves us with some very, very hard choices. There are no individual winners in this. There are several losers in this. The hope that in these options, what's being developed is a collective win to improve performance. But as has been noted by David and by others, what really would be a win is to have the infrastructure change such we don't have to make these hard choices. Rail North Partnership has got the job. It has to issue a specification to the train operators in order to develop the timetable detail in the way that David has just described. My recommendation to them and to you is that the MRTF option B plus is the basis of that spec. It has some problems, but I think it's the best, least worst option available to us. It does improve the use of the capacity, it regularizes service patterns, and it provides a sound basis for the development going forward. My concern about the sticking to the COVID timetable, which I would describe as the do nothing option, is that that would take us back down the priority list, and we would lose momentum for change, which is what we really do need here. So my view is to go with that, and it's very difficult, and I'm well aware of the depth of feeling from a number of parties on this, but I do think it's the best option that we have available to us at the moment.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Could you just confirm how long out from a timetable change is required for all the work to be done?
For all the work to be done, the timetable development work the first bid that goes into the national systems is 55 weeks before the timetable it comes into operation. So that would be about November this year. But you've got 3 months' work to get to that point, and it's that work which needs to start, because we need to be doing that work in September. We need to be doing. I mean, frankly, the train planners need to start work now, in order to get the detail done of putting the resources that timetable and coming with the detail of those resources to go for consultation. We need the train operators need to come out to consult with members during this autumn in order to know what the formal bid is at what's termed D-55, which is 55 weeks before it comes in.
Thank you very much.
So it sounds a ridiculously long gestation period, and frankly, it is a ridiculously long period. But nevertheless, because there are so many overlapping issues that come in from all around the country, that's the way the network code works.
Thank you very much for that. That's really helpful. I've noticed the chair has just arrived. Welcome, Councillor Robinson. What I'd like to do before I hand over, if that's okay with you, I'd like to first of all just go through. We've raised some conditionalities that we would like the government to agree to. So I'd just like to run through those first of all, and then over to you, Councillor Robinson. I think what we will do is move then first to Dan Jarvis, Mayor Jarvis from Sheffield City Region, to relay his views, which are held by most of the board members. So the conditions in terms of agreeing to B+, that the integrated rail plan to be published this month, and we don't know whether it is or not, detailing what rail projects in the north will be funded and when they will be delivered. So we'd like to understand when that is coming out, because that gives an overall integration plan of the railways in the north, including Northern Powerhouse Rail, TransPennine Upgrade, HS2, and of course the vital work through Manchester. Commitment to an accelerated timetable for a package of initial rail infrastructure schemes in Manchester that fully resolves the current severe problems to start earlier than currently planned. Ensure the infrastructure schemes in Manchester enable a long-held commitment for new connections, including services from Bradford and the Calder Valley to Manchester Piccadilly and the airport. Provide firm commitment to reinstate the direct rail links between South Yorkshire and Manchester Airport if they are continually removed into that December 22 timetable, and the timescales of actually when that service will be reinstated, and satisfactory resolution of the detailed Cheshire and Cross Warrington service patterns during the next phase of the timetable development. So they are the 5 conditions that we would look to have met before we agree to the B+ timetable change. So we can just move, Chair, if that's okay, to ask Dan Jarvis to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim, and I'm grateful to you and all your colleagues for the work that you have been doing. And of course, we all understand and appreciate the very long-standing challenges as a result of congestion in and around the Manchester area, which has a knock-on effect for all of the north. But I have to say that the process that we have undertaken in recent months has been, in my view, deeply unsatisfactory, to say the least. And we're now being asked today to approve an option that we haven't consulted on. Now, I think that Rail North Committee members have very diligently attended to their duties in recent months, and there's been countless conversations between us where collectively we've expressed our concerns both about the process and also about the outcome. And as a consequence, as you will know, we wrote to ministers a number of weeks ago and asked them to convene NTAC in order that we could have the opportunity to raise our concerns with the Rail Minister. We were given the opportunity to do that, and the Rail Minister committed to us that he would look at these issues and come back and discuss them further with us. So it's therefore incredibly disappointing, I think, that as board members of the Rail North Committee, we haven't had the opportunity to discuss our concerns more recently with ministers. I also think that it is not appropriate that we should be seeking to take very significant and long-lasting decisions that will impact on rail connectivity across the north of England for years to come, without the knowledge of what the integrated rail plan will deliver for us all. So I think that the conditions that have been laid out are really a kind of precursor for certainly any agreement that I could offer to proceed down this road. In terms of the outcomes of this work and the adoption of the B+ option has very significant consequences for South Yorkshire, because it means that we lose the direct link from South Yorkshire and from Sheffield to Manchester Airport at a point where we're seeking to rebuild our economy as we emerge from the pandemic, at a point at which the government are committing to level up the north of England. The loss of that connectivity and the impact on our universities and our businesses across our city region would be very significant indeed. So I'm afraid that leaves me both with concerns about the process, concerns about the outcome. And my position, representing South Yorkshire, is that I couldn't agree to proceed with this option unless that there was agreement from ministers in DfT around the conditional points that you've laid out. So that's my position. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Dan. I think we all agree entirely with that position. There's a number of other members who also want to come in, and I know we've had Andy, Tracy and then Craig. So did you want to come in next?
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Chair. And I'll very much follow on from where Dan Jarvis was. We recognise that the work that's gone on around this, but the reality of the situation is over 4 years after the chaos of May 2018, the north of England would have to have imposed effectively a substandard timetable with no date as to when it's going to be fixed, because we don't have clarity on the infrastructure problems which caused the chaos in the first place. And that is a very poor place for us to find ourselves after everything that we've been through. And it suggests to me that the rail industry's focus is still not on the north of England, and it needs to be. Otherwise, there will be a continued challenge from this group. We recognise the need to move forward and the need to have a timetable. But I want to speak in support of what Dan Jarvis said, particularly in respect of infrastructure and the clarity about delivery of infrastructure. We have made the point for many years now that there needed to be investment right through central Manchester, through that Castlefield corridor, onwards to Piccadilly, to create infrastructure to sustain reliable passage through Manchester that then benefits the whole of the north of England. And the government, the rail industry, has totally failed actually to recognise that case that has been made, and hence we find ourselves in the position that we're in today. So, agreeing with the conditionality laid down by Tim, I would just want it to be clear that on infrastructure, we need clarity on the electrification from Victoria to Stalybridge, because that is crucial to deliver crucial service. That delivers essential services back to Greater Manchester that we are losing in this B+ option. So I am talking about the 3 trains per hour for Atherton and Hazel Grove, but I'm also talking about the restoration of a service through Goulburn, where I am planning to commit 15 million or so pounds to the building of a new rail station. You know, we have to have a commitment that infrastructure will be complete by May 2024 so that those services can be restored. But separately, we need clarity on the accelerated timetable for the Castlefield corridor so that we then solve those problems, and we know how long we're going to have to live with this substandard timetable. So in supporting what you said, Tim, about conditionality and what Dan has said about the IRP and other issues, I think from this meeting we need to ask you to write to the government, setting out clearly our conditions, awaiting for the government's response to those conditions before this committee can take a final view as to whether or not we feel we can endorse the timetable change reluctantly. if we don't get significant and proper answers to our conditions, I think we should reserve the option that this committee might have to be formally in dispute really with this timetable change, because we cannot endorse what's being proposed. As a working planning assumption, I think we need to understand the planners will need to move forward with a timetable for December 22. So it looks like the B+ option is the one that I guess is the one that's on the table. And I don't think we should hold back the preparation of a working timetable for then. And we certainly don't want the COVID timetable to be still in place by then. But I think it's really important that I echo Dan's concerns. These are not new concerns that anyone on this call is raising. They have been repeatedly concerned. It's like we've been shouting into the abyss for 10 years or more about central Manchester infrastructure. And if there isn't a firm response to the points that we're making, the basic, we would be selling our residents short, because they're being asked to accept a substandard timetable with no date by which it ends. And I'm sure no one else on this call from an elected member point of view is prepared to sign our residents up to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Andy. Very strong points that I think, again, we all strongly agree with. Tracy, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. And certainly, as you say, there is agreement that I see myself as the Mayor of West Yorkshire as a champion of the passenger. And the passenger has had a terrible time over the last few years. Obviously, COVID has impacted on that, but we definitely cannot go backwards to 2018, 2019. We can't accept something that is substandard, but we need to make sure that there is that connectivity, that reliability. And let's not forget that going for B+ means that we will lose one of our services to Manchester Airport from our region, and York obviously relies on that as an area of great tourism for international tourists. They need that link to Manchester Airport as well. But it is part of a greater picture that the meeting with the Minister was cancelled when actually we're up against it. We're at the 5 minutes to midnight. You've heard earlier how immediate our decision needs to be because of the work that goes into a timetable change, and how we've been forced into this position. And I do feel for Dan and support him wholeheartely as a real champion for the people of South Yorkshire who want that connectivity to be able to go on holidays and so on and travel for work. I really get it. But there are other things as well around this, that the unrealised commitments for through service from Bradford and the Calder Valley to Manchester Piccadilly and Manchester Airport as part of that infrastructure plan in Manchester. It's really important that we keep that engagement, and I'm hopeful that the Williams-Shapps review will lead to greater transparency and more urgency from government to work with us. We know our regions, we know what's needed, and it'd be great to have those conversations in a timely fashion so we don't feel like we're pushed into a corner in this way. But just to really reiterate what the other mayors have said, that we can't be in a position where we're forced to choose a substandard service just because we haven't got the detail. We need that IRP as a matter of urgency, and I would urge anyone who has influence with government, please get that to us. We can't be making these decisions in a vacuum. We need to know what government are thinking. So that's my position, supporting Dan, and reluctantly, as Andy said, if we are in a position where we're at the last chance saloon, then of course we might have to take option B+, but we don't want to do that. We want government to come back with these conditional requirements answered. So thank you so much, Chair.
No, thank you, Tracy, and thanks for, again, strong comments supporting everything that Dan and Andy and others have said equally. Craig, I know you want to come in as well.
Thanks very much, Liam. Well, really, firstly, I just want to support what the previous speakers have already said. It's absolutely important that government and the rail industry understands that our support potentially for B+ is conditional on the points that Tim has set out. If I could just allude briefly to Warrington, the Warrington West station's only been open 2 years, and the business case was predicated on 3 services per hour, and what B Plus offers is 1 service per hour. So we're already undermining the infrastructure, the investment that was made in that station only a couple of years ago. So it's really important that that condition is there, and I'm pleased to see it. And secondly, it's already been mentioned, but access to Manchester Airport is really important for each and every one of us and the areas and the residents that we represent. So if this is an opportunity for us to look at access to Manchester Airport, please can we bear that in mind, and please can we look at direct access for Cheshire and North Wales as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully support everything you said, and particularly from a Liverpool City region perspective. We completely agree with all those Cross Warrington points as well, because that particularly causes us challenges equally. Andy, you've still got your hand up. Do you want to come back in, or is it a legacy hand? Yeah, that's fine. Not a problem. I can't see any further indications at this stage, so I'll perhaps kind of summarise without kind of trying to drag this on too much further. But I find this really frustrating, because the number of meetings that we've had around this issue over a number of years now, it feels like Groundhog Day. This has been in the government's too difficult box for over a decade now, and quite frankly it needs to be dealt with, and I get quite frustrated that it feels that we're being given the bitter pill of B plus without being told the rest of the treatment package that we're going to get us back to full health, if I use that kind of analogy. And look, we're not naive. We know that we have to sort of grasp the nettle to try to move these things forward, but we cannot, representing the passengers of the North and the kind of economies and environment that kind of then supports, sign up to a service reduction without that conditionality that everyone has mentioned about, in terms of having the right infrastructure package going forward into the future. We absolutely need to have the integrated rail plan properly published, so we know what the vision for the future is going to be, that needs to be transformational for the north of England. I get really frustrated when I see the millions being tipped into Crossrail in London, that there's still question marks over NPR, around elements of the Transpennine route upgrade, but crucially around these central Manchester issues, which are, if you like, the very first building block to dealing with issues on the railways across the north of England. So I think it's very clear that we know that we have the conditionality we want to see from government. Andy's right, we need a very strong letter going to government, backed up with a strong press release that we've already agreed collectively, because it's very important, as being accountable to our public, that they know that we're fighting on their behalf to actually get these things moved forward. And only when we've had a proper full response from government will we know whether we can agree to the bitter pill of B+, or reserve our position and not be prepared to agree to that if we're not getting the response we need from government accordingly. We want to work with them, but they have to meet us halfway, and all too often it feels as if we're not being given that olive branch. So I think those are my kind of summary points there. I don't know if Tim and David need to come back on those aspects, and particularly perhaps tell us where kind of conversations with DfT are up to, because we don't just want to have another one of these meetings where we're making a standpoint and then in a month's time just repeat this argument, because it's a waste of everyone's time, frankly. So David, Tim, I don't know if you want to come back.
So certainly from my perspective, we'll get that letter constructed after this meeting, and we will just send that draft around, and then that will go out either in tonight or tomorrow back to ministers, and we will wait a response. David, any further comments?
Nothing else. I think we're very clear, the conditionality, as Tim read out, so that is what members have asked us to put forward, and that will be in the letter, and we'll work on that basis from there.
Okay, excellent. Is there anything else we need to deal with today then, gents, or do we know where we're up to and how we're moving forward, and convene, hopefully, soon with a proper response from government?
So we do, Chair. and also we will make sure that we get a response back from the Minister as well in terms of setting up the round table, so the revised date for that meeting.
Chair, just say very quickly.
Of course, Andy. Yeah.
Dan, sorry, I don't want to prolong the meeting unnecessarily, but obviously I do want to recognise that the industry does need clarity, doesn't it? And we do. We're not saying that we don't appreciate the fact that people need to get on and plan, and we hope they won't see what we're doing here as making life too difficult for them. So I just want to reiterate that point, that we understand planning assumption, but I think therefore the letter needs to be clear that we need an early reply from ministers. And personally, I would think before we all leave for the summer, whether or not we should try and reconvene this committee to see then, before the end of this month, whether we agree with the reply to the letter, and we accept the reply to the letter, albeit reluctantly, or if we don't agree with the strength of the letter, we then say, we are not now blocking the timetable, but we are formally in dispute with it. I think that's where we need to get to, Chair, because otherwise we'll be timed out and there'll just be no point. But I just think this has to be brought to a head. As many colleagues have said, it's just rumbled on, and it's never been brought to a head. And this issue needs to bring it to a head. And we need to see the government put its cards on the table about Central Manchester infrastructure and its commitment to it, the IRP and other issues. And then we need to then, as a committee, consider whether what they put on the table is good enough, or whether on behalf of our residents we say it's not. And, therefore we are not signing off. And when the timetable is introduced, we as individuals will say, well, we did not support this. So I think that's the way I would, if that's helpful, so that we don't look like we're just prolonging the difficulty for the industry. We're not trying to do that. We are just trying to stand up for our communities here.
Absolutely, Andy, I agree with that entirely. And I think that's, for me, why actually the letter needs to be public now at this stage. I actually think that I understand the Prime Minister's going to be making a speech tomorrow about levelling up. This is a classic levelling up issue, so it needs to be given the public attention it needs to actually get some movement on it. So I would propose that the letter and the press release, obviously, is in the public domain accordingly. I know Richard wants to come in, and Keith as well, before we close. So, Richard?
Yeah, mine was briefly to say, thank you for that clarification, Andy. I think treating it as a planning assumption is a good mechanism. That these guys have to get on with doing something, and we can't give them nothing. So I appreciate all the conditionality. I understand all that, but as a planning assumption, that's a good phraseology. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Richard. Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. I just wanted to say, we've been at this for a long time now. I think Andy's mentioned for many years now. So this isn't something new we're asking for. The Manchester corridor does affect all of us, as us in Cumbria as well. I just wonder, is it worthwhile, Tim, I have every faith in the letter going out, but is it worthwhile circulating it to the colleagues before it goes out, just to make sure we have the wording right, and then we can all send it off with full support of the committee.
I'm happy to do that.
Thanks, Keith. I think that's a very, very practical suggestion, and that's something I hope we can do within the coming hours, actually, to get that finalised.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure colleagues can watch the phones and turn it around very, very quickly, not to delay the situation.
Marvellous.
But happy to support.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Keith. Well, I think it's very clear where we've got to. So if we can sort of ask our officer team to take away those actions and get those implemented within the coming hours and the next couple of days, then hopefully we can finally start to move this forward with a bit greater clarity. So with that, I propose we close today's meeting and look forward to a meeting, as Andy says, very soon before the summer break, to try to kind of move this saga forward. So thanks for everyone's attendance, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.